there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that makes one thing that Jeffrey Epstein was tied up very closely, certainly with Mossad, but probably with the CIA as well. And what's going on here is if that list is made publicly available, we'll see those connections.
So recently, John Mearsheimer went on Andrew Napolitano's podcast and talked a little bit about the truth regarding Jeffrey Epstein's associations, especially in light of the firestorm of stories related to the Trump administration's outright refusal to publish the client list and other information about Jeffrey Epstein as they promised. Now, he also delves into issues related to the U.S.-Israeli connections and relationship, and he's the master of that. He wrote the very book on that with Stephen Walt, The Israel Lobby. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Professor Mearsheimer, why do you suppose that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been to the White House and to Capitol Hill each 3 times in the past 6 months, the most recent of which were 2 visits this week, concluding yesterday?
Let me make one big point here. You do not want to underestimate the extent to which Israel is dependent on the United States. As I've said on a number of occasions on the show, Israel used to pride itself on being an independent actor in terms of fighting wars and in terms of conducting its foreign policy. That world has gone away. They are heavily dependent on us. Benjamin Netanyahu needs us desperately. So it's no accident that he has come to visit Trump 3 times. Just think about that, 3 times in the past 6 months. And as you watch him interact with Trump, what you see is that he goes to enormous lengths to kiss up to Trump. And the reason is he's so dependent. His country is so dependent on the United States. This is an unhealthy situation for Israel, and it's also an unhealthy situation for the United States. But it is where we are at today.
Yeah, absolutely right. If, when I'm filing my tax return, I'd like to claim Israel as a dependent because that is the dependent of all American taxpayers. We're funneling money to Israel like no one's business. They've been the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid, since Israel's inception in 1948. So that's absolutely true. And I think he hits it on the mark here when he talks about that Trump needs his ego to be inflated at times, but this is a reciprocal relationship because recently we had Trump sending out Truth Social messages saying, hey, Netanyahu's a war hero. That's disgusting, by the way. As he enacts a genocide in Gaza, makes no bones about it. They're openly talking about concentration zones at this point, and rockets aren't even lobbed from Gaza into Israel anymore. The Palestinian people are a defeated people. Hamas is not completely defeated, but they're not even putting up a fight. And it doesn't even seem like a ceasefire is on the horizon here. So yeah, Israel's totally dependent on the U.S., and you saw that in no uncertain terms regarding this Iran thing, because despite the fact that we shovel money into their coffers, give them weapons, military and intelligence, billions of dollars a year, they still rely on the U.S. to come in and bail them out in that war, which included strikes against 3 Iranian facilities and supplying disruptor missiles to counter the attacks, they called it in the media. It was really responses by Iran after Israel's attacks on Iran.
Do you suppose that Trump is naive enough, simple-minded enough, vainglorious enough to be impressed by the sycophant-like behavior? I mean, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu nominating somebody for the Nobel Peace Prize. This sounds like a skit on Saturday Night Live. It's so absurd. Who would take such a nomination seriously, except perhaps the nominee?
I think that's exactly right. It's laughable to people like us, but to Trump, having his ego assuaged is of enormous importance. You also see this with Mark Rutte, who is the present head of NATO. He goes to great lengths to kiss up to Trump because he believes, like Netanyahu believes, that flattering Trump really gets you a long way. And I think both Rutte and Netanyahu are correct in that assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to agree with that. History seems to show that with Trump. That does seem to be an important facet of his personality. But yeah, nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize is absolutely ludicrous. Trump has done nothing to enact peace or even put us on the pathway to peace in any of the theaters of war that the U.S. is involved in, even after talking about it endlessly on the campaign trail regarding Ukraine. He recently, decided to override the Secretary of Defense and send more weapons to Zelensky after talking about how he would end that war in 24 hours. Most people didn't believe that was really possible, even some of his supporters, but he's maintained status quo Biden foreign policy related to Ukraine. He did open up, discussions with Russia, and that's a good thing. He deserves commendation for that, but he's not doing what it takes to put us on the pathway to peace there. Same with Yemen. Instead of doing that, he bombed that country for a month. It depleted a lot of the U.S. missiles in a perilous, fruitless effort to attack the Houthis, a power that resisted a ground invasion by the Saudis and a blockade by the U.S. for a decade. It just was a stupid ordeal pushed by Hegseth and those that wanted to do that, Mike Waltz and company, right? And the same is true with Gaza. It's not like, Trump's trying to end that. So Trump does not deserve a peace prize. We still have troops in Iraq and Syria too, the latter ostensibly to fight against ISIS. So there's no peace movement within the U.S. and Trump launched the new war with Iran, which we won't hear the end of, by the way. They're talking about how, this is the 12-day war, it's over. No, the neocons and Netanyahu are going to bring up the war propaganda again and expect regime change there. They always have.
Do you think there's any connection between, or can you shed any light on, or can you offer any analysis of the fact that while Netanyahu was here, the government did a 180 on the Epstein files, and after the Attorney General said they're on my desk and we're reviewing them now, says the client list doesn't exist? Is there any connection between Netanyahu's presence here and this bizarre, aggravating to his base announcement?
I don't have any hard evidence to show a connection, but as Max Blumenthal laid out on the show the other day, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that makes one think that Jeffrey Epstein was tied up very closely, certainly with Mossad, but probably with the CIA as well. And what's going on here is if that list is made publicly available, we'll see those connections. I'm not sure of that because I haven't seen the list. But there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, for sure. And again, I think Max laid that out very clearly on the show the other day.
Yeah, that's a pretty good reason the list and information regarding Epstein is being withheld, don't you think? And it crosses presidential administrations. Trump, then Biden, then Trump. We're never going to see that because it doesn't behoove the federal government to show us that. George Carlin said it's a big club and you're not in it. I've said that in several videos, but that pertains to this situation perfectly. And he's right. There are at least circumstantial things that point to a relationship with Mossad, which involve Alexander Acosta, the DA that gave him that sweetheart deal in 2006, saying that he was part of intelligence, Epstein that is, and that's why he kind of laid his hands off him and took it easy on him. Also, the fact that his mentor was the most famous Mossad spy of all time, Robert Maxwell, who essentially had a state-run funeral in Israel after his weird death, by the way. And he was very good friends with Ehud Barak, maybe even best friends. Ehud Barak visited him about 30 times. He even lived with him at a time, and Ehud Barak was the former prime minister of Israel and the former chief of Mossad. So these kind of connections aren't getting in the mainstream, but the dissidents paying attention to this stuff know this. And so does Mearsheimer. I'm glad he's kind of on the same page as those that have talked about this recently.
Here's the president's reaction when in his presence, actually at a cabinet meeting, the attorney general was asked, what's going on here? Before she could answer, he jumps down the reporter's throat. Why are you even asking this? Watch this.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein.
In February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And that's it on Epstein.
The United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Alexander Acosta, who was the Trump Secretary of Labor in the first term and who negotiated the plea deals with Mr. Epstein, said he was an agent. Would it be beyond Mossad to use sex as both a weapon and an instrument of intelligence?
Oh, absolutely not. And Jeffrey Epstein was the perfect person to use. Again, we don't have the hard evidence, but the circumstantial evidence here is overwhelming. And I would also note to you that when I listen to Trump talk about this issue, he's protesting too much. He's so defensive that it makes you almost certain that there's something going on here that he doesn't want to let out. We don't know absolutely. We're not absolutely certain what that is, but it certainly smells like there's a connection here with Israel.
Yeah, certainly so. He said it right there. Trump's response is indicative of a man that has something to hide, and he might. I don't know that. At one point they were friends. I think all the evidence really points to that. Their friendship was disrupted in the early 2000s because of a dispute over property in Florida, and they never really seemed to be friends after that when many of the offenses were alleged to occur. So I can't be accusatory in that way, but I think more likely is the scenario that they're all in it. They're all up in this thing, and I don't mean they as far as every individual in government, but their centers of power, their parties, Republicans and Democrats. Big bureaucrats in the government are in on this thing, and that's why, again, they have unlimited incentive not to reveal this thing. And that's what you're seeing now. And for, the people that supported Trump in the run-up to this election on these promises, or at least partially on these promises, I think you were duped. I think this is just a cover-up. This isn't even the Epstein story anymore. It's just the cover-up. And Mearsheimer is perfectly correct about Trump's response to it. Bondi going against things she said about it before the client list. Alina Habba, who talked about this, Trump's lawyer, talked about the fact that, this is going to blow people's minds. The people he was associated will be shocking, and we're going to reveal this. That was said to the American public on behalf of this administration, and you're being duped now.
Will Israel ever be at peace with its neighbors without them being reduced to impotence?
No. If they're reduced to impotence, you will have peace. And that is Israel's ultimate goal here. It's to basically cleanse Greater Israel of the Palestinians, create what's effectively an all-Jewish state, and then turn Iran into Syria, and basically create this situation where there is no country in the region that can challenge Israel in any meaningful way. And of course, at the same time, they will go to great lengths to remain joined at the hip with the United States. That's what they're trying to do. Now, whether you think they can achieve that is another matter.
Yeah, that's right. They want to expand West Bank settlements too. They, probably want to invade Lebanon again, make claims to that. It's just so bogus. And the craziest thing about this, and the ultimate irony, is they're the only power in the Middle East, unless you consider Pakistan part of the Middle East. And I think that's technically part of Asia. They're the only power in the Middle East with nukes. And it's a secret nuclear weapons program. The very kind of program they were accusing Iran of having, despite the fact that Iran didn't have nukes whatsoever. And the U.S. went to war with them, shelved the idea of negotiating with Iran, creating a new JCPOA-like agreement and normalizing relations with Iran. Probably the best thing that Obama actually did. That agreement wasn't perfect, but they were complying with it. And Obama, hey, he was a disaster in terms of foreign policy. We know that from Syria and the drone war and Yemen and many other catastrophes. But that's something that actually put the U.S. on a normalization path rather than a path to war like we always seem to be. So, yeah, I agree with Mearsheimer there as well.
Well, that is effectively unachievable, isn't it? Are they going to reduce Iran to impotence? Are they going to reduce Egypt to impotence? Are they going to reduce Turkey to impotence? Or what are they going to do? Destroy the sovereignty of the countries around them for 1,000 miles?
Well, they'll try for sure. There's no question about that. I do not think they will succeed for 1 second. As we just saw in Iran, their efforts to turn Iran into Syria failed. And if anything, it reinforced the strength of the regime in Iran. And before I came on the show today, I was reading where Israeli intelligence says that they believe that Iran has nuclear material, that not all the nuclear material was destroyed in the various attacks during the 12-day war.
It was only a matter of time. They're already going to drumbeat for war again. The propaganda's already begun, like I said, and I believe there's reason to believe that's true, that much of the uranium was taken out, especially of Fordow, because we have satellite images that appear to show that, a huge motorcade of vehicles arriving in time. Plus, they had the previous 8 years after the JCPOA was shredded to essentially do that. The JCPOA remained in place with some of the European powers and with China and Russia, but the U.S. got out of the deal. But now they don't even have IAEA inspections, so this kind of arms them with another branch of propaganda that we are sure to see to support another path to war with Iran, regime change on the table again. Again, it's only a matter of time. You know, Trump's celebrating that like it was a big victory, but it doesn't seem to have helped anything, and it only seems to have laid the scene for future conflict and laid the seeds for that. So that's what I think we're going to see there.
Well, so all of this tells you that offensive failed.
We read the same article at the same time, because this just came out about 90 minutes ago, and I was going to ask you about it. Does this resolve? I guess Trump would get defensive on this if asked in public and on camera. Does this resolve the totally obliterated argument that he and Pete Hegseth hung on to, that in fact there was no obliteration, no total obliteration, as they insisted for weeks?
Well, one would think in Donald Trump's case that for something to be finalized, he would have to get the okay from Israel, from Israeli intelligence. And now that Israeli intelligence has said that some of that enriched uranium has survived, he would acknowledge that and admit he was wrong. But if it was just Americans like you and me and others making the argument, he wouldn't accept that. He prefers to rely on Israeli intelligence.
There seems to be the case, and think about that. Israel is essentially a country subsidized in terms of their security, and I don't mean security, I really mean warfare. Their warfare is subsidized by the United States, and to what benefit? But still, it's Trump, the leader of the free world, relying on Israeli intelligence for many of these strikes. We know that when it comes to Iran, that there were Mossad agents in those briefing rooms facilitated by John Ratcliffe, based upon, stories that Max Blumenthal and others have written on that. Excellent story when that was happening, by the way. So, yeah, Mearsheimer's right about this, and unfortunately, we're going to be drawn into another conflict with Iran. I just hope at the time it's another president that isn't willing to go full bore into regime change mode when that's on the table. I fear a false flag, regarding Iran more than anything, and that would be a duplicitous move on the behalf of Israel or other entities that want to see the U.S. in war, actually killing Americans, killing soldiers, etc., as the pretext for launching a war of that kind. That is my biggest fear, because it really seems like that, would be the thing that you would want to do if you want to draw the U.S. into a hot war with Iran, which we really were, but to go full bore to regime change, that's, I think, what it will take to sell that to the American people.
Do you think that in those private meetings with Netanyahu, and by my count there were 3 of them, well, one of which was partially public, where he ostentatiously handed what purported to be a copy of the letter of nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, that Mossad agents or officials were present? Or do we not need Mossad agents? And I'll use Max Blumenthal's phrase, because the Mossad stenographer seated 3 seats over from Trump is always there. He has another job. It's called the Director of Central Intelligence.
Yeah, he's referring to John Ratcliffe, and yeah, I think that's a pretty apt description, by the way.
I agree with Max. The Director of Central Intelligence is in Israel's pocket. And there's no need for Mossad agents to be there. Furthermore, Benjamin Netanyahu was there, and he's more than enough to deal with this issue.
Yeah, Mossad and the CIA sure seem to be indistinguishable these days, don't they? It's basically synonymous at this time. 2 intelligence services joined at the hip, capable of and guilty of executing massive numbers of people, psychological operations, war propaganda, wars, genocides. That's what we're dealing with here. And, I'm glad that Mearsheimer weighed in on the Epstein thing because of the potential ties to Israel, the country that we're talking about here. And I just said the most plausible scenario to explain Epstein's wealth is the fact that he was either an intelligence asset or taking blackmail payments, or a combination of both. I think it's most likely he was taking a combination of both forms of payments to render the services that he was on behalf of Israel. I mean, there's no ammo that you can have in terms of leverage over a foreign government than blackmail, especially when it comes to sexual blackmail. And all the evidence we've seen shows these very strong connections with the most powerful people related to Israel's intelligence, at least through history, that he was not only friendly with, but extremely close. Like, some of the closest associations he ever had in life were related to Israel, and specifically Mossad, especially when it comes to Maxwell and Ehud Barak. And these are the questions that are not being asked. There's lots of great questions that, people are asking regarding Epstein, regarding, his apparent suicide, how he made his wealth, the client list, etc. But his connections to the foreign intelligence services and potential intelligence services in general, I think, is the most important question to answer. And I think, again, it shows or reveals why indeed it may be because this government, this deep state, and all these presidential administrations are too afraid to release the list. They know the ramifications that will have on foreign policy, and specifically the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which is tightly bound and essentially at the hip, no matter what, in any conflict. The U.S. doesn't even get to have sovereign policies of its own that it wants to go forward with independently of what Israel wants. We saw that with Iran completely. Those plans were just shelved, in favor of this bombing campaign. The U.S. left those negotiations on the table. They were supposed to have them continuing, including the day after the strike. But hey, let's just pull the parachute cord, abandon ship on that, and go to war for Israel's sake, like the U.S. has in so many other cases, Syria and Libya and others. Iraq, again, there's always been complicit people with the U.S. supporting this stuff, the neocons and the military-industrial complex. Aspiring warmonger politicians have always been on board, but the Israeli influence is palpable in these things as well. But I do want to hear what you guys have to say. What do you think down below? Was Epstein a Mossad agent? Was he working for the CIA? What do you think about Mearsheimer's take on that and how it revolves around the U.S.-Israeli relationship? Do you think anything's being missed down there? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Napolitano too. He's fantastic. Has excellent guests on his show, and please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you join up, you'll support me financially, and I appreciate that, and you'll also get access in advance to all my videos on YouTube before they release to the general public. So until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.